I'm Andrew's dad. My name's Ron. And what I'm going to show you this evening, just this evening in the UK where we are at the moment,
hopefully,
are some photographs and pictures that were taken during the war period in and around Gravesend. But firstly, I'd like to tell you, by coincidence and by an awful lot of luck, how we've come by these particular pictures. When Jean and I were married, Jean's my wife, when we were married in 1949, we had a professional photographer of the local Gravesend Dartford Reporter, as it was then. They were all black and white, there was no such things as colour in those days. And when we got those photos, I wasn't happy with them. And I thought to myself, well, I think I can do as well as that, so I started doing photography. And as the years went by, I bumped into Mr. Mitchell, who was the photographer of the time, who took our photographs at the wedding, at other weddings, because people used to come and ask me if I'd do their wedding photographs, which I used to do. And I got sworn at many times by Mr. Mitchell, but Mr. Mitchell did us a favour. Now, by sheer luck, later in life, a friend of mine had a phone call from a close friend of his that his son had found some lantern slides on a piece of waste ground in a road called Portland Avenue, Gravesend. Philip said I'd come up on my bike and have a look. His friend said, you'll want your car because there's 2 boxes and they are very heavy. Well, Philip took the car up, found the 2 boxes, and in those boxes we found that there were glass plate slides. They weren't lantern slides as such, they were glass slides which were used by the professional photographers in those days, and these are such slides. A glass with emulsion on them. Now they were soaking wet, they were wet through, and we rang Kodak and asked Kodak how we could dry them out fairly quickly. They said, you do it, but it won't be quick. And they advised us to wrap them in newspaper and keep them for at least 3 months before we opened them, which we did. After the 3 months period, we opened each box. Now what was in the box is not a complete record of the war damage throughout Gravesend, but some of the war damage. But after we dried them out, they looked quite good. And I proceeded with my enlarger to...
Mr. Mitchell's.
I proceeded with my enlarger, when my wife interrupted me, to enlarge or print the actual photograph that was on the slide. But unfortunately, as soon as I put a little bit of heat on them, all the emulsion on the slide cracked up. And in some cases it looked, I don't know if you can see it, but the emulsion is all hanging off. Now, I couldn't get a photograph of that at all. So what I had to do, very patiently, was scrape 2 of these slides clean and sandwich them between the poor slides with a bit of sellotape around the edge, then put them in my enlarger, switch the light on, and I got my picture. Now, I did this with the majority of the pictures you're going to see in a moment. And it took a lot of patience, it took a lot of time, and a little bit of expense. But it was well worth it, because the pictures you're going to see are unique. There is not another picture, there might be some of the pictures, but Mr. Mitchell's pictures in particular, and I'll point out some of Mr. Mitchell's pictures, they are unique because we have the slides and nobody else has a picture. So now I'll proceed and show you from the start of the war, and I'll explain as much as I can as I go along what the content of each picture is, and if I can give you dates, I'll give you dates. Right, this is the introduction of the war years in and around Gravesend. Now, the war started on the 3rd of September 1939 on a Sunday, and many people had already been issued with the air raid shelter, which is known as the Anderson shelter, and were busy erecting all these shelters all round Great Britain, not only in Gravesend but all round Great Britain. They had to dig a hole about 4 foot deep and erect the shelter in it. That was the safest way, because war was imminent, and the government had issued every family that couldn't afford one. If you got over a certain wage, you had to pay £7. But if your wages were under £7 a week, you managed to get a free shelter. Now, the first thing that happened on September the 3rd, 1939, was the evacuation of all the school children from Gravesend and the surrounding areas. Now, this is a picture of one of the vans which was used to bring some of the children in from the country. And it is a van of a shop down High Street, Gravesend, as you can see on the side of the van, 35 High Street, Gravesend. And it is, I think it's Coveney's. I think it was a shop called Coveney's, which was a grocery shop. But they came in all sorts of transport, because they had to get to the Gravesend West railway station, which was also, and used to be, the boat train station from London to Dover. And the children came in all shapes and sizes, and they all had to have a name label attached to them, their gas mask, and a change of clothing in their little bags and little suitcases. They came in all sorts of transport. There is an old Royal Enfield motorbike, which was very prevalent at that time, and this is September 1939. Now, the nice little shot of Peter and Jean Morris. Now, Mum must have spent a few hours embroidering on their haversacks their names. And I do these shows, I show these slides to various groups, women's institutes, provost clubs and all sorts of various clubs, and I'm waiting one day for somebody to say, that's me and my sister, or that's my sister and me, but no, nobody's ever said it as yet. But they were all congregating down in the West Street area of Gravesend. This is a policeman by the name of Sergeant Wigmore, with the latest hi-fi equipment of the 1939. That is his megaphone, electronically operated by the battery, which is charging up, has been charged up, and it carries in that pouch, in that case. When we had a reunion in 1989, the 50th reunion for the evacuees, which was held in our local Fort Gardens at Gravesend, we found Sergeant Wigmore. He was in his 80s, and he came along and met all the evacuees which he'd seen on that day, but obviously they were a lot older than what they were in September 1939. The prams, mums carrying the little babies, the children, mums were crying, children were crying. I can remember it, walking down the road and mums with their handkerchiefs to their faces. But these are actual pictures taken by Mr. Mitchell at the time, but never published. They were never published in our local paper. He used to take about 10 or 12 pictures of an incident, and you might publish one. Sometimes there were none published at all. This is coming along West Street, Gravesend. Now, anybody that knows Gravesend would know that that is the High Street, that end, coming along West Street towards the ferry. There is an old Falcon, the new Falcon pub, which is still there today, and that used to be a shrimp and winkle shop. Now, I don't know if Australia you know what a shrimp or a winkle looks like, but to Gravesenders, a shrimp was a shrimp, and they were jolly nice food. They were seafood. The ladies are teachers who went with the children on their evacuation. And you can see here again their gas masks, their label, and their little luggage, change of clothing. They gathered at the base of the terminus, and that, by the way, was a public house named the Terminus, but has since been demolished. And if you can see, looking out the window, a very curious little lad with his pants and his vest. That's all he's got on, wondering what the heck's going on. And if you look right at the bottom, you can see one of the boats that took these children on their evacuation. On that Sunday, 3 boats, I say boats because one was a paddle steamer, and they were all pleasure steamers that used to ply from London to Southend, Margate, Ramsgate and other places round the coast. Little holiday cruises. This is the Royal Daffodil, one of the first boats to leave Gravesend in the early hours. It must have been about 8 or 9 o'clock on the Sunday morning. Now this is not a picture of the actual boat leaving Gravesend. I've been unable to get one of the Royal Daffodil on that particular day. But this is the Royal Daffodil, what it looked like, or what it would have looked like on that particular day, only with children on it instead of people going on their pleasure cruise. This is an actual picture of the Queen of the Channel, and it was a motor vessel. It wasn't a paddle steamer, it was a motor vessel leaving West Street Pier at Gravesend with the evacuee children on board. This is another one with the evacuee children on board, and it is the Golden Eagle paddle steamer. As you can see, the paddle, one of the old paddle steamers. And in effect, I was on board that particular boat on that particular day at that particular time. Now, 3 boats that left. The Royal Daffodil was aimed at Lowestoft, and it managed to get in at Lowestoft, and the other 2 boats should have followed. But owing to rough weather, and it was very, very rough indeed, many of the children were so seasick, they were really green, and the decks were really running, they were really. They had to put in at Yarmouth, and I myself went in on the boat to Yarmouth. There's another picture of the children, as you can see quite clearly, on the boat itself. Now this is rather a unique one. It's a photograph out of the paper. It is one of Mr. Mitchell's photographs, and it is out of the Gravesend Reporter, and my mother, when she died in 1989, must have cut this out of the Reporter at the time and put it away with her valuables, because when we were going through all her papers we found this cutout from the newspaper. And on that particular photograph is Ronald, that's me, and my brother Ken. There we are, on that particular time. We knew all the other names of the other people around us, all the other lads, but we didn't even know that existed until my mother died in 1989 and we found it amongst her papers. So I managed to copy it, and I think it's rather unique actually. This is not evacuation, but at the same time, when the boats were going out, they used to ship, there used to be a gun, an anti-aircraft gun, over on the Tilbury, on the other side of the river to Gravesend, which was Tilbury, and they used to ship shells across the river to the gun. And this is a photograph of one of the ships actually ferrying, it's a ferry actually, the Mimi, one of the ferries called Mimi, I'm not sure which it was, ferrying the shells. And I think this particular photograph, I can't understand it at all. It is actually of the ferry, it is on that ferry that you just saw. Now this is an air raid shelter, and it is of concrete. It's not built out of metal, that is concrete. Now if a bomb dropped on that, I don't think it mattered if it was cardboard or concrete, but I don't think anybody would have stood a chance on the boat at all. But that was the sort of thing that was going on at that particular time. I don't know if in Australia you've got copies or see Dad's Army, the Home Guard and things like that. But they were things that did happen, and later on you will see. But these things did actually happen, and I can't conceive that a concrete built on the bridge of a ship is going to stop it sinking. And this was their defence. It was in effect a First World War gun which they used to use on the aeroplanes when they had dogfights. I did know the name of the gun, but it escapes me at the moment. And that was all they had. If a Jerry plane came over about 2 miles high, dropping bombs, I don't know what good that gun would have been to defend it, quite honestly. There again, this is not a very good picture. It's the only one I've got. This is a merchant ship with what they call a fish balloon. Now, a barrage balloon was more bulbous, but on the river they had that shaped balloon, which we always used to be known as a fish balloon. And when their tethers broke, they used to have a line going down to the ship. Now, this stopped dive bombing aircraft coming in too low, because they could let this up a bit higher, but they used to lower it down as they went along, and if there was an air raid or there was a chance of airplanes coming over, they could let the barrage balloon up a bit higher. And every ship had one. Wasn't just one.
Question, how exactly would that stop the plane from...
Cable. The cable.
So
the cable.
To the cable.
It would fly into the cable, and that's it. It would be it, yeah.
Okay.
Normally what would happen, it'd hit the cable would unbalance the aircraft,
Okay.
It would crash, but 9 times out of 10 the balloon would be cut and it would go up in the air. And they used to go up straight up first. They used to go nose up first, the fish balloon. An ordinary barrage balloon went up differently, and I'll explain that to you later on. Now, when the war started itself, there was a period from 1939 right the way through, virtually to Dunkirk, where there was nothing happening at all. And from when we were evacuated in September, I was home by Christmas, in actual fact, with my brother, and so were many others. But about May, June, they started after Dunkirk. Dunkirk was the end of May, beginning of June, when they rescued 350,000 troops from the beaches of Dunkirk, got them back to England, and the Germans then started sporadic air raids. And when the air raids started, the people of Northfleet, where these people resided, used to go to the tunnels. Now, the tunnels in Northfleet were built in the early 1900s and late 1800s. They were built for bricklaying purposes, really. They used to have kilns and that where they made bricks, but they were still remain there, and the population used to go down in the tunnels, which were about 100 foot underground. They were all chalk cliffs, really, and they were underground. And what always beats me when I look and find that lady there is 100 foot under the earth, and that lady there has got tin hats on. If a bomb dropped on the surface, they wouldn't even hear it. And while they've got their tin hats on, I'll never know. Never know. There they are, making their tea, got the old paraffin lamp, which was the thing of the day. Now, I've included these in. These are aircraft which were based at Gravesend Airport during the Battle of Britain. Now, the intensity of the air raids crept on a lot, and in July, about July the 7th to be exact, the Battle of Britain itself started, and Hermann Göring sent over his bombers, and they were going to obliterate and knock the RAF out of the skies. And Gravesend Airport played a big part in defending the islands, and these are 2 aircraft of 501 Squadron Hurricanes, which were based at Gravesend, but this was taken at Hawkinge, which is down near Folkestone. It was a forward base. They used to go down there early in the morning and wait for the Germans to come over the coast, and they were waiting for them because they were right on the spot. I include this one because this is quite typical of what used to happen at the time. Both these aircraft, SDN and SDT, this photograph was taken on the 15th of August 1940, and on the 18th of August that plane had been shot down. He was badly injured in hospital. That plane had been shot down and the pilot was killed. He was a pilot officer, John Bland, and he is buried in Gravesend Cemetery. Now, that was the life expectancy of a pilot of a Battle of Britain of about 2 weeks. and they were 2 aircraft that were based at Gravesend. Now this picture is actually on Gravesend Airport. They're Spitfires of 66 Squadron, which were fighters, and there is a 501 Squadron Hurricane happening to be on the airport at the same time. And they were the only 2 squadrons from the 7th of July to the 30th of October, when the Battle of period started and finished, that occupied the airport at Gravesend. You can see it's Gravesend because there is the river running in the background. Now these pictures were actually published in the Times on the 24th of September 1940, but all it said on it was somewhere in southern England, and you couldn't distinguish where it was because all the background had been blacked out, so you couldn't see the river at all. Otherwise the Jerrys could get hold of the paper and identify where it was. But that is Gravesend Airport with Spitfires during the Battle of Britain. Now Jerry knew exactly what was going on in and around Gravesend and everywhere else in the United Kingdom. You can't really see it clearly, but the date on that map is August 1939, and it's updated on August 1940. Now these numbers, 5, 7, 6, distinguish where guns, the anti-aircraft guns, are placed around certain places. These were the docks at Tilbury. This is Gravesend itself. You see, it says Gravesend. Down here were 4 guns, which were very near here to where we are standing at the moment, and I'll come on to those in a little while. But they had aerial photographs taken in 1938 and 1939 because the German Lufthansa airline used to fly from Germany, land at Gravesend Airport, which was Gravesend London East, drop off its passengers and then go on perhaps to Croydon. But before they landed, they would circle all around the area and they would take photographs. This is a photograph taken from the Imperial War Museum of a Heinkel 111 over London. There's the river winding its way round. This was actually taken over the dock area of London, a common sight during the battle in 1940. This is the remains of a house in Dudley Road, Northfleet. It was the first air raid that the southern area had seen. It was the heaviest air raid actually that the southern area had seen since the beginning of the war. It was on the 16th of August, and many houses in Waterdales, Vale Road, Rogerville, London Road, Springhead Road, all round that area received very, very heavy damage. In fact, 28 people were killed on that particular day. This is another one in Dudley Road where they're mending a bomb crater, where they're doing up their water, etc., and all the other houses have been damaged along. Collier Road School. This was a boys' school, a senior boys' school, and it did a lot of damage. That was on the same day, 16th of August. This is what remained of the wood workshop after incendiary bombs had set the place alight. This is known as Rayful Road, Gravesend, and in actual fact, where I'm speaking from, I am in Rayful Road, Gravesend. I'm living at number 69, and 69 Rayful Road is approximately just there. The houses were knocked down and the site stood empty for many, many years, and they did build houses on them. This is a little bit out of sequence, I'm sorry about this one, but the invasion was pending, and the warning was that the church bells would ring if there was an invasion. And at a local church, and in fact it's at Northfleet, Perry Street, All Saints Perry Street, and that was the message. The church bell, in future the bell will not ring except, well, you know. Well, that meant invasion. Germany had invaded. A little bit out of sequence, I'm sorry. This is coming back to Rifle Road again, and Andrew knows this very well. This is Elliot Street, where he nips up the top and gets his fish and chips. And there are the houses where we are actually living now, that have been rebuilt. They weren't rebuilt till 1974, and that's when we moved in. This occurred at 11 o'clock on the 1st of September 1940. And I was in the church, which was about 250 yards away, and actually saw the German planes, or German plane, there were 5 German planes coming up the river, heading towards London, and the guns, which I mentioned earlier, which were very near here, down the road, started to fire at them. And as the aeroplanes were coming towards them, one of them thought, "I'll have you, mate, I'll drop some bombs on you." And he missed the guns about 250 yards away from here and hit the houses, Rifle Road, and a few other roads round it. 2 people were killed in this particular raid. Used to be a shop just opposite where I showed you, and this chap, he was an ex-warrant officer in the First World War. Nicholson his name was, and he had a little shop, and he blew his shop to pieces, but he wasn't afraid to put up the notice. Business as usual. That was the typical spirit of the people of all over England, really, at that time, and in particular in London and the southeast area. This is a bomb damage of the old swimming bars that Gravesend used to have. Now, it wasn't in operation at that time. It closed in 1938 when new swimming bars were erected a little way away, but the bombs did hit it and it was demolished. This is a house in Pelham Road near the town in Gravesend. It happened one night and the house was completely demolished. It's in fact number 16 Pelham Road, and I couldn't tell you what date, but all these now, what you're going to see, the photos from now on, are during what they call the Blitz, and London did suffer heavily through the Blitz, and also on the outskirts. These are houses in what we call Newhouse Lane, Gravesend. It's near Woodlands Park. Well, I say this because Andrew knows where these locations are, although many of you wouldn't, that if he's going to show this round Aussie. They just repaired all these houses, and after about a week of repair they dropped some more bombs in exactly the same place, and this is the second lot that they're repairing. This was a house near the town again, or a row of houses near the town, known as John Street, Peter Street. And on the corner there used to be a pub. You can just see the big light. That is a big light they used to hang outside the public house, the Crown. Every house in this road suffered damage, and every house had to be pulled down and demolished. And in actual fact they did build 4 masonettes which the council took over, and I had the pleasure of letting those particular flats later on in my working career. Our war memorial. This was in what they call Windmill Gardens, near a very well-known spot known as Windmill Hill, which was the highest point in Gravesend. But they knocked the old war memorial about and it had to be rebuilt. But if you saw it today, you'd never know there was any damage done to it at all. Now, very near Rifle Road, we have the promenade and a canal. And we have what we know as a canal basin, where ships and boats of all sorts used to come in and lay up in the basin. But round the basin itself used to be little factories. This is a foundry works, an engineering works. And bombs dropped on this particular engineering works one morning, and although it's only made of corrugated stuff, it did do a lot of damage. And the manager, who went to work in his car that morning, didn't go home in it. His poor little car had it. Now this is one of the famous ones of Gravesend, because it was a training ship for cadets that used to train for merchant seamen, or for merchant seamen officers. It lay off the promenade of Gravesend,